the Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials. I looked into the streets, the glaring lights, and the tall buildings, and there I conceived Metropolis. Quite a quote, isn't it?
It really is. That's Fritz Lang talking about that moment of inspiration.
Exactly. Looking at a city skyline and envisioning Metropolis, his 1927 silent masterpiece. Today, that's our subject.
And it's so much more than just an old movie. It's a landmark, still incredibly powerful nearly 100 years on.
We want to unpack why Metropolis still matters so much. We'll look at its revolutionary visuals.
Things like Art Deco, Bauhaus, Futurism, even Gothic touches.
Right, and its big ideas about society, the incredible story of how it was nearly lost and then found again. It's quite a journey.
We'll be touching on, the art, the politics, how people saw it then versus now, and that amazing restoration effort.
Okay, so let's start with those visuals. Lang sees the city, gets inspired.
Yeah.
But it went beyond just copying skyscrapers.
Oh, definitely. It was filtered through German Expressionism, but also, as you said, those specific art movements. Art Deco's geometry, Bauhaus function, futurist energy.
Right.
They weren't just decoration.
How so? What did they add?
Well, think about it. The sleek Art Deco lines kind of reflect that rigid, elite society up top.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe the functional Bauhaus feel hints at the industrial world below. Futurism gives it that sense of speed, technology.
And the Gothic. That feels like pure scale, maybe even a bit menacing.
Exactly. Imposing, foreboding, it all blends to create this whole distinct world on screen.
And the scale itself is just huge, especially for a silent film.
Well, that was one advantage back then, wasn't it? No need to worry about sound recording on set meant you could build these absolutely enormous, grandiose sets.
Like those factories. Or the towering cityscapes.
Precisely. They immediately tell you about the power structures, the inequality, just through the visuals.
Yeah, they had some pretty clever tricks to make it look even bigger, didn't they? Someone mentioned the shift-in process.
Ah, yes. Genius technique, basically using mirrors, angled mirrors, to composite actors into miniature sets or paintings.
So they look like they were actually in these massive environments.
Exactly. It created that illusion of immense scale. And it's a technique that was still being used in principle much later. Think Lord of the Rings, some of those shots.
Wow. Okay. And these visuals weren't just technical exercises. They served the story.
Absolutely. The towering city, the dark workers' world below it is the central conflict. Visualized.
And then you have those unforgettable images. The robot Maria transformation.
Oh, iconic.
The Moloch machine. That nightmare vision.
Terrifying. Eating the workers.
And the Tower of Babel sequence. It's all just burned into film history.
For sure. Which leads us naturally into the film's ideas, the social and, political messages it was grappling with.
Right, because it's not just a visual feast. It's got things to say.
Definitely. The core conflict is that hierarchy, isn't it? The thinkers and planners living in luxury up top.
While the workers, the hands, toil away underneath. Literally deep under the earth's surface, like a hell beneath the heaven of the city above.
Yeah, that religious allegory is pretty strong. The upper city as a kind of Eden, the workers' city as Hades, and that central machine.
Moloch, demanding sacrifice. Freder's vision of it is just chilling.
It really is powerful visual storytelling. And then you get the film's main theme, summed up in that famous line.
The mediator between brain and hands must be the heart.
Right. That's presented as the solution, the core message. But, this is where things get complicated.
Yeah, how people interpret that message varies wildly, doesn't it? Some see it as, almost proto-fascist.
Mm-hmm. The idea that the workers' revolt is bad, and what's needed is this heart, maybe a strong leader, to mediate between classes, not change the system. That's one reading.
But others find anti-fascist themes, too, like with the evil robot Maria.
Exactly. She's seen as this destructive force, sowing chaos like a whore of Babylon, embodying sin, whipping up the mob, maybe a warning against demagoguery.
It's complex. And Lang himself apparently cooled on the heart message later on, calling it a fairy tale.
He did, which makes you wonder about his original intent versus maybe his co-writer and wife Thea von Harbu's influence, who later did align with the Nazis. It adds layers.
Definitely adds layers.
Mm-hmm.
And comparing it to other works of the time, like Rossum's Universal Robots.
Right. In RUR, the robot revolution completely overturns everything. Metropolis seems to argue against that kind of violent upheaval.
Suggesting it's futile.
Perhaps. It definitely critiques how workers become just appendages of the machine, dehumanized by industry.
A clear comment on the Industrial Revolution's impact.
For sure. But the solution offered isn't revolution, it's Well, it's that heart, which remains pretty ambiguous.
Okay, so we have this visually stunning, thematically complex film, but the version we see today, that's a story in itself, isn't it? It was almost lost.
Oh, absolutely. After the Berlin premiere, it got chopped up significantly. Censors, distributors, they cut huge chunks, over half an hour's worth.
So for decades, people were watching a much shorter, arguably quite different film.
Exactly. The full scope of Lang's vision was basically missing. People tried to reconstruct it using stills and notes, but the footage itself seemed gone forever.
Until Argentina.
Yes.
The big discovery.
Yes.
A nearly complete 16-millimeter print surfaced in Buenos Aires. It was a monumental find for film history.
How did that even happen?
Well, part of it goes back to an Argentine critic, Salvador Samaritano, who remembered seeing a really long version decades earlier, back in '59.
Wow, his memory sparked the search.
It helped keep the possibility alive. But the real detective work was by Fernando Peña. He persistently tracked rumors and eventually got access to this private collection where the print had been sitting overlooked for years.
Amazing. And it wasn't easy for him to get access, was it?
No, apparently it took years dealing with bureaucracy. The story goes his ex-wife became head of the film museum, and that finally opened the door. He found it incredibly quickly once he got in. She apparently joked it was like finding the Holy Grail. Unbelievable. So that find led to the restoration we can see now.
Pretty much. The 2010 restoration incorporated that Argentinian footage. It's not perfect. Some parts are degraded, scratched, understandably.
But it's the closest we've ever gotten to Lang's original cut.
By far. It transformed our understanding of the film. And the irony is, Lang himself had pretty much written it off by then, so the original version didn't exist anymore.
Just incredible. It really highlights how important film preservation is. Now, thinking about it as a silent film, that obviously shaped how it was made and how it felt.
Completely. The acting style, for instance, it's more expressive, sometimes quite melodramatic by today's standards.
Like Freder clutching his heart all the time.
Exactly. Without dialogue, they relied on bigger gestures, more intense facial expressions to get emotions across.
And the intertitles, the text cards?
Crucial for plot and dialogue, obviously. But Lang was clever with them. Sometimes he'd hold back information, letting the visuals speak first, building suspense. Like when Freder first sees Maria.
Right. And the silence itself. That must have created a unique atmosphere.
It really did. It forces you to focus entirely on the image, on the movement, the composition. It creates its own kind of intensity.
Though, of course, most showings, even then, would have had live music, and the restored versions have scores now.
Yes, and the music is vital. It adds so much to the mood, the drama, the emotional impact. It really works with those silent visuals.
And the visual style itself, we have to talk about its influence. It's huge.
Undeniable. You look at later sci-fi, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Blade Runner. You can see Metropolis's DNA all over them.
It really set the template for the look of dystopian futures, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The towering cityscapes, the machinery, the class divisions visually represented, it laid so much groundwork.
So let's talk about that overall legacy. Why does Metropolis still resonate?
Well, partly it's that pioneering status in sci-fi cinema. It influenced countless filmmakers, artists, even musicians. It established tropes we still see.
But it's more than just influential, right? The theme still hit home.
I think so. Issues of social justice, class inequality, our relationship with technology, the potential for dehumanization. These are still very current concerns.
Yeah, you can definitely see parallels today.
And the fact that people are still debating its meaning, digging into its politics, its symbolism, that shows it's still alive, still provoking thought nearly a century later.
So, wrapping this up, Metropolis was visually revolutionary, tackled huge social questions using the language of silent film, and its survival is this incredible story of loss and rediscovery.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the power of visual storytelling, the importance of film preservation, and its impact on how we imagine the future is just immense.
Which leads us to a question really for the filmmakers and creators listening today, the new Hollywood generation perhaps. You see the power of a film like this made with limitations we can barely imagine now, dealing with massive social change. So what are the stories, the visual languages you're creating now that will still speak to people, still resonate, decades or even a century from now?
That's a great question to leave people with. And for you listening, if you haven't seen Metropolis or haven't seen the restored version, definitely seek it out.
Experience that visual power. Think about its layers and just appreciate the journey it took to reach us today.
You might find it still as dazzling and thought-provoking as Lang intended back in the 1920s.
You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.